Mexico City never sleeps, but in the shadows, the rules of the underworld are unforgiving. When a group of cartel members made the mistake of challenging a much larger enemy, they had no idea they were digging their own grave. Captured, taken to an isolated location and forced to speak on camera, each was given the chance to say their last words before the inevitable. Some begged, others challenged to the end. But the outcome was the same for everyone. Today, you will delve into this brutal and realistic story, where every second is a sentence and every word could be your last. Sit back, put on your headphones and get ready to dive into this story. The dawn of September 18, 2022 began like any other in Mexico City. The orange glow of streetlights illuminated the empty streets, while the few cars that were still circulating hurried past, ignoring the invisible tension that hung in the air. The city never slept, but in the shadows, bloody conflicts were decided far from the eyes of the authorities. In a peripheral neighborhood of the capital, in Colonia Moctezuma, 5 men shared the same hiding place. To any unsuspecting neighbor, that 2-story house was nothing more than an ordinary building, with nothing special about it. But, inside, it was a real makeshift bunker, a meeting point for a group that had been challenging a rival cartel for months, taking advantage of the chaos in the city to expand its territory. They thought they were untouchable. But that night, everything would change. The house was reinforced. Metal doors, barred windows and cameras strategically positioned to monitor the street. But overconfidence was a silent poison. The 5 believed they were safe, but they didn't realize that the trap had already been set for days. The rival cartel knew where to find them, knew their schedules, their weaknesses. Shortly after 3 in the morning, when the neighborhood was immersed in the tranquility of the early morning, the attack began. The first people to notice that something was wrong were Raul Mendoza and Hector Galvan, who were downstairs playing cards at the kitchen table. The 2 laughed and drank beer, while in the background a television was playing a news report about the growing violence in the country. Hector mocked the report. "They talk as if they don't know who's in charge of this city." Raul laughed, taking a sip of his beer. If they had the courage to tell the truth, they wouldn't live to tell the next news. The words had barely left his mouth when a dull noise echoed down the street. The sound of tires screeching on the asphalt. The 2 froze for a moment. "Did you hear that?" asked Hector, already getting up. Raul frowned and walked to the window, opening the curtain a crack. What he saw made his blood run cold. Several vehicles without license plates had stopped in front of the house. The doors opened and, from inside, men dressed in black came out, all masked and armed to the teeth. Raul turned to Hector in a desperate movement. They came. But before they could react, the main door exploded inwards. A loud bang shook the house. The first to enter was a tall man, carrying a shotgun. Behind him, others followed in line, each holding rifles. The lights in the house flickered due to the impact of the explosion on the door. Raul tried to run to get his pistol from the kitchen drawer, but before his hand could reach the weapon, one of the intruders hit him with the butt of the rifle. The blow was dry and precise. Raul collapsed to the ground, stunned, feeling the metallic taste of blood spreading in his mouth. Hector still tried to react, pulling a knife from the counter, but a shot was fired into the ceiling as a warning. "Move and die." The invader's cold voice paralyzed any attempt at resistance. "Don't walk higher," Ernesto Olivares, Jorge Castillo and Marcos Vazquez. They woke up to the noise. Jorge pulled the bedroom curtain and saw movement on the street. "It's them." Panic took over. Ernesto ran to the back window, trying to find an escape route. Without thinking twice, he forced the window and jumped onto his neighbor's roof. For a moment he felt the hope of escape. But hope meant nothing against prepared men. On the other side of the slab, one of the kidnappers was already waiting for him. As soon as his feet touched the concrete, a brutal blow to his stomach knocked him to his knees. Ernesto tried to fight, but he was pulled by his collar and thrown back into the room, landing on the floor with an impact that made him lose his breath. The five were trapped. In the room, Hector and Raúl were on their knees, hands tied with plastic ties, faces bruised. When Ernesto, Jorge and Marcos were brought in, they were also forced to kneel. The air in the room was charged with adrenaline and despair. One of the kidnappers, who appeared to be the leader, slowly walked up to Raúl and held his face tightly, forcing him to look up. Did they think they could take what is ours? Raúl didn't respond. His heart hammered in his chest. Another kidnapper took the phone and made a call. We have them. The answer was short. Take it to the location. Record everything. The prisoners were forcibly lifted and dragged out. The street, which had previously seemed silent, was now a scene of pure terror. The neighbors knew what was happening, but no one dared look out the window. Whoever witnessed something could be next. One by one, those captured were thrown into an unmarked van. The engine roared and disappeared into the early morning darkness. At that moment, each of the five knew they would never return home. They were heading straight to their deaths. The air inside the van was suffocating. None of the five captured men dared to speak. The only sound was the roaring engine and the bumps of the uneven road. The destination was uncertain, but they didn't need words to know what awaited them. The silence was just a confirmation of the death sentence. Raúl Mendoza looked around, trying to find a way out, but there was nothing but darkness. The only faint light came from the gaps in the bodywork. His wrists burned from the tight braces, and his forehead was still dripping with blood from the blow he had received. The only thing I could think about was the mistake they had made. They had challenged the wrong cartel. Marcos Vasquez closed his eyes, breathing deeply, trying to remain calm. But nothing at that moment allowed tranquility. His chest rose and fell uncontrollably. He prayed, not knowing if God could still hear him. Where are they going to take us? Hector Galvan's voice sounded trembling in the darkness. Nobody responded. After about an hour of travel, the van slowed down. A gate creaked as it opened. The vehicle traveled over uneven terrain, passing through rocks and dry land. Finally, he stopped. The back door opened, and bright lights blinded them. Get out. The five were brutally pulled and pushed outside. The cold early morning air was biting, but it didn't compare to the fear that now dominated their bodies. They were in isolated terrain, probably on the outskirts of Mexico City. The place was surrounded by trees and makeshift walls. In the center, spotlights illuminated a dirt floor stained with dark marks. The metallic smell in the air left no doubt as to what it was. Raúl Mendoza looked around and felt a chill down his spine when he saw the cameras in position. Everything would be recorded. It was the rival cartel's way of sending a message to anyone who dared cross their path. The kidnappers were in no hurry. One of them lit a cigarette and looked at those captured with an almost amused smile. Today you will appear on the internet. Better pay attention to the last words. The group leader walked up to the main camera and pointed at the five prisoners. Put them on their knees. The order was carried out immediately. The five were pushed to the ground, lined up side by side. Behind them, the kidnappers positioned themselves, rifles in hand. The leader walked slowly among the prisoners, studying each face. Let's get started. I want to know if you have anything to say before the end. He turned to the camera. That's what happens to traitors. Let everyone watch and understand. The first to be forced to speak was Jorge Castillo. The man was pale, his eyes wide. His breathing was short and uncontrolled. Say something. Come on, this is your chance to say goodbye. Jorge looked at the camera and his mouth trembled. My family. Please forgive me. The voice broke on the last word. He tried to continue, but fear paralyzed him. The kidnapper lost his patience and pulled another prisoner forward. This time, it was Ernesto Olivares. Unlike Jorge, Ernesto seemed indignant. His eyes were filled with anger. "Do you think this will end the war? You are as rotten as we are." The leader smiled. "Well, at least you have courage." The third was Hector Galvan. He couldn't say anything. He just cried in silence, shaking his head as if refusing to accept what was happening. "Ah, this one has nothing to say. Let's go to the next one." Marcos Vasquez was pushed forward. He took a deep breath and looked at the camera. "I know I'm going to die. But don't think it will end here. Others will come after you." The kidnappers laughed. There's always someone who thinks they can make threats before they die. Finally, there remained Raul Mendoza. He closed his eyes for a moment, then raised his head and looked directly at the camera. "My mother always said I would end up like this." She was right. The silence that followed was heavier than any words. The group leader walked in front of the camera and nodded. "It's time." The last words had been spoken. Now, all that was left was the final outcome. The cold wind cut into the skin of the 5 men kneeling on the dirt floor. The silence that followed his last words was suffocating, only broken by the distant buzz of insects in the night. The smell of dried blood filled the air, a reminder of how many had been in this same place before them. The camera continued recording every second of the moment that would mark the final sentence. The leader of the kidnappers watched the prisoners for a few seconds before turning to the masked men behind him. "Let's get started." The captors moved as if they already knew exactly what to do. No hesitation, no sign of doubt. They had done this before. One of the kidnappers took a machete and passed the blade across Jorge Castillo's arm, slowly, without applying pressure, only to see fear take over his face. Jorge trembled from head to toe. "Who said we need to finish this quickly?" Raul Mendoza looked to the side and saw Hector Galvan sobbing in despair, his eyes swollen from crying. Ernesto Olivares, the most rebellious, clenched his teeth so hard that his jaw seemed about to break. He knew he was going to die, but he refused to show fear. The leader approached Raul and bent down to speak in his ear. "You were the smartest of all." He didn't cry, he didn't beg. "But do you know what I hate most? People who accept death without fighting." Raul felt a chill run down his spine when the kidnappers began discussing the order in which they would carry out the execution. It was a sadistic game. "Let's start with what cried first." Hector Galvan was pulled by force, his hands tied, making any attempt at resistance impossible. He screamed, his entire body shook. "Please. I have a family. I'll do anything." The kidnappers ignored him. The camera was focused on him, capturing every moment. The group leader looked directly into the lens. That's what happens to traitors. The first shot echoed across the empty land. Hector fell forward, his body motionless on the ground. Blood began to spread rapidly across the land. Nobody moved. The remaining 4 just looked down, knowing that it would be their turn soon. The next one. Ernesto Olivares was pulled. Unlike Hector, he didn't scream. He just looked at the camera, took a deep breath and spat on the floor. "You are nothing but cowards." One of the kidnappers, angry, kicked him in the face, making his nose bleed. "Let's see if you'll stay brave after this." The second execution took longer. Ernesto was forced to stand and look directly into the camera as the leader talked about how no one was above the cartel's rules. When the shot was finally fired, his body collapsed like a puppet without strings. Marcos Vasquez and Jorge Castillo were in shock. "I don't want to die," Jorge murmured, his voice breaking. Marcos just closed his eyes. He knew there was no point in begging. The 2 were executed in sequence, without ceremony. No sound other than gunshots and the echo fading into the night. Finally, only Raul Mendoza remained. The cartel leader crouched down beside him and patted his shoulder, as if congratulating someone. "Look, it's your turn. You were the last. Do you know what that means?" Raoul took a deep breath. "That you're going to kill me the same way." The leader laughed. "Smart. But you know what's worse? It's not death. It's the time you spend waiting for her." Raoul closed his eyes for a moment. He felt the tip of the rifle barrel press against the back of his head. The cold of the metal made his heart beat even faster. "You can get it over with." The leader looked at the surrounding kidnappers. "He wants us to get this over with quickly." They laughed. The shot came soon after. The camera continued recording for a few more minutes. The bodies of the 5 captured lay on the dirt floor, the dust around them dyed red. The kidnappers said nothing. They just turned off the cameras and walked away. The leader picked up the phone and made a single call. "It's done. Let's release the video." The war between the cartels did not end with that recording. On the contrary, it was just beginning.